now, there are thousands of Catholics on their knees begging God, just tell me if this is the one. And they're met with silence, not because God isn't speaking, but because no one taught them how to actually listen. Here's the painful truth. Most people don't discern their way into marriage. They rationalize their way into it. They take the natural attraction, sprinkle some prayers on top, and call it God's will. And 5 years later, they're in a marriage counselor's office saying, I thought I heard God say this. But today, my friends, that is going to change. We're going to go beyond just the pray about it methodology. We're actually going to delve into it. We're going to take a look at the 3 neurological reasons why you can't trust your heart. We are going to look at how the saints actually discerned marriage, with direct quotes from the saints and their letters, by the way. And we are going to take a look at 5 diagnostic tests from psychology that predict marital success and or marital failure. So this isn't just a talk, it's a spiritual surgery. And I need you to do something for me. I need you to do something a little uncomfortable. You're going to take out your phones right now. You're going to go and open your notes app, because we're going to apply this in real time to your actual relationships and to your dating life. So, are you ready? Let's do this. Why can't you trust your feelings? The science and the scriptures of discernment. The first and foremost things, the brain chemistry trap. When you're attracted to someone, your brain floods with dopamine and oxytocin. These are the same chemicals that make gamblers keep betting after they lose. This is why church requires engagement periods. Because as St. Alphonsus Liguori says, in his moral theology, he says, passion binds even the wise. And here's the clinical fact. A study in 2017 in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience proved that romantic relationships or romantic love activates the same brain regions as cocaine addiction. That's right. That's why breaking up hurts like a withdrawal, because it's chemically, that's what it is. The second thing is that Jeremiah 17:9 tells us that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can trust it? The Hebrew word for deceitful means crooked like a river. It bends towards what it feels good and not what is actually good. So a good therapeutic exercise for you is write down what are the 3 ways my current relationship might be bending me towards my desire rather than God's truth. And you want to be brutally honest, because this is between you and God. So how did the saints overcome all of this? St. Francis de Sales wrote in his letter to the discernment seeker in January 1605, we must distrust our own desires, especially when they come on suddenly. True love is a slow flame that withstands the wind of trials. The saints expected their feelings to mislead them. That's why they created a system for discernment. And this is why we look at it in this way. Now, the second thing is the 5 discernment systems of the saints. St. Ignatius had the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. The 3-time rule says that God confirms his will through repetition. Like Joseph, 3 dreams, that's in Matthew 1-2. What we can look at is in practical application, has God brought the same issue up through multiple sources? A homily, a prayer, a friend, anything like that. If yes, it's likely him. If no, just wait on it. 2, St. Teresa of Avila's peace test. In the interior castle, she writes, the soul certain of God's will is like a sea so deep no storm can disturb it. Here are some clinical correlations to this. Research from the Gottman Institute shows that happiest couples have a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions. So if your relationship feels like constant turmoil, it's likely not God's peace. St. Thomas Aquinas, 4 questions. In the Summa Theologica, Aquinas says, true prudence requires 1, memory. So what has God done for me in my life, in my past? 2, docility. Am I teachable? 3, shrewdness. Do I as what it is? And 4, foresight. Where will this lead in 10 years? What you want to do is apply these to your relationships right now in your notes. St. Gianna's fruit inspection, the diary, discernment diary, actually. So before marrying Patrick, she wrote in her diary, I must examine whether being with him increases or decreases my hunger for the Eucharist. This is from her letters to her future husband in 1955. So what are the theological foundations of all of this? Matthew 7:20 says, by their fruits you will know them. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church 2364 says, the married state is ordered to the sanctification of the spouses. And here's a therapeutic application. Keep a 30-day relationship journal. What you want to do is you want to track prayers or prayer frequency before and after dates, frequency of the sacraments, and acts of charities that are inspired by this relationship. 2, you want to watch for patterns. So if your spiritual life consistently declines, this is an objective data, and you should look at it. And as St. John of the Cross warns, where there is no love of God, put love of God, and you will find love of God. So what are the action steps? Tonight, if you go on a date or when you go on a date right after, do a little checkup, which would be asking the questions, do I feel closer to Christ? And was Christ honored in our interaction? Another way to test this is through St. John Paul II's Language of the Body litmus test. In his Wednesday catechesis, which ran from 1978 to 1984, the saint taught that dating should prepare us to see Christ in our beloved. So what are the 3 diagnostic questions that you could be asking yourself? When I look at them, do I see, 1, a soul destined for eternity, as the Catechism teaches? Do I see someone I'm called to serve, as Mark 10:45 tells us, or just an object of desire? 2, does our physical attraction express 1, covenant love, which we can see in Song of Songs 8:6-7, or create a compulsive attachment? The 3rd thing you're looking for is, if we ever marry, would I still consider this relationship holy? Now, what are the clinical correlations to all of this? The Fisher Temperament Inventory shows that lasting relationships and marriages require 2 things. 1, shared spiritual values, so not just chemistry. And 2, mutual servant leadership. Blessed Carlos Acutis refused to date anyone who didn't share his Eucharistic devotion. Now, granted, he was pretty young, but he had that heart. He kept on saying, how could I give my body to someone who doesn't love Christ's body? What a beautiful quote. And finally, our last section of the day, the 5 discernment traps and how saints actually escape. Trap number 1, the sunk cost fallacy. You've probably heard it in economics, but we're going to hear it again. The sunk cost fallacy. This is when time invested overrides the truth. Here's the theological foundation for all of this. Ecclesiastes 3:6 reminds us that there's a time to keep and a time to cast away. Yet many cling to dying relationships because I've already given them 3 years, and that's a lot. All right, so here's the clinical data for this. A 2016 Journal of Behavioral Decision-Making study found that people stay in unhappy relationships 2.5 times longer when they've invested significant amount of time and or money. Here's a good warning to live by. Time spent is not equal to God's will. A wrong relationship prolonged becomes a prison of your own making. And a good saintly witness to all of this is Saint Jane Frances de Chantal, who broke her engagement after realizing that she's engaged because of fear of singleness and not because of God. And that was her driving force. She later left and became Now, what are your action steps? Write down, if I met this person today, would I choose them again? And if this answer is no, ask yourself, what am I afraid to lose? Trap number 2, God will fix them. The redemption fantasy. You guys, here's a scriptural reality check. Yes, God is capable of fixing them, but let's do this. 1 Corinthians 15:33 warns, bad company ruins good morals. Yet many people date project partners because they hope they will change. And a good saintly correction is St. Monica, who prayed for 30 years for St. Augustine's conversion, but she never married an unbeliever. A good action step right now is to list 3 current behaviors, not potential behaviors, 3 current behaviors you're rationalizing. An example would be, he yells, but he'll change after marriage. Trap number 3, but we have so much chemistry. And that is, my friends, a biological deception. Neuroscience of attraction, so when you're looking at Helen Fisher's research, for example, it shows that romantic chemistry, dopamine surges, last 12 to 18 months. That's the exact time frame of most failed engagements, by the way. All right, so here's some saintly wisdoms. St. Charles says, passion is the cheapest foundation for marriage. It burns hot, then leaves only ashes. St. John Paul II says, in Love and Responsibility, eros must be purified by agape, or it becomes idolatry. And finally, what you can do is you can use a therapy test and you can ask, can you enjoy silence together? True intimacy thrives in quiet, not just excitement. Trap number 4, I am lonely. These are fear-driven choices. And here's the psychological root. A 2020 APA study, it linked loneliness to impaired decision-making, with the subject about 40% more likely to ignore red flags when desperate. Are you in a relationship, or are you discerning because you're lonely? And here's a spiritual antidote for all of this. Psalms 68:6. Your vocation isn't a cure for loneliness. It's a calling to love. Here are some saintly examples for you. Saint Teresa, she suffered decades of spiritual loneliness. Yet her yes to God birthed a global mission. Everyone knows Mother Teresa. Your action step for today, spend a day in holy solitude. No phones, just prayers, journaling, spending time with God. Ask, what am I trying to escape? Trap number 5, if everyone approves, it must be God's will. And that is the herd mentality, and that's not true. Catholic teachings, which is the Catechism of the Catholic Church 1778, says that conscience must be formed by moral law, not by majority opinion. So just because everyone's saying he's great doesn't mean he is. And here's an historical warning. Judges 21:25 says that everyone did what was right in their own eyes, and that led to Israel's collapse. And you want some therapists insight? This is called groupthink, and it is deadly in discernment. There are many people that marry abusive partners because my family loved him, but they didn't see that side of him. So be careful when you're discerning. Think of St. Thomas More, for example. He resisted England's approval of divorce and lost his head over it. His last words were, I die the king's good servant, but God's first. Your action step for this trap will identify one unpopular truth about your relationship. For example, my friends think he's perfect, but he refuses to apologize. That's something to consider. These traps are not just theoretical. They're soul endangering. So tonight, what you're going to do is you're going to take your notes, you're going to go to adoration, and you're going to pray. And you're going to say, Jesus, reveal where I've been deceived and give me the courage to act. Then you're going to text your accountability partner. And you're going to text them this phrase. You're going to say, call me out if I start justifying what God condemns. Because as St. Edith Stein said, those who remain in truth will be free, even if it costs them everything. All right, my friends, thank you for listening up with me. I will be with you in the next video. Bye for now.